What's up, guys? David DeSell here, your host of the Business with the Boys podcast, and as always, joined with my good friend and co-host and fellow psychopath who's in the midst of 75 hard, Landon Troyer.
What
How we
up,
doing?
world?
I know I'm in the way of both you and my lunch, but we gotta record this because we're fresh off of a pretty good
Another
episode,
boring
dude.
ass lunch of meat and cottage cheese because of this bullshit 75 hard journey you're dragging me on, man. I'm sore. I'm
Uh,
hungry. Um, but we're doing it. We're doing it. So
Listen, I know you're doing it, and I know that it's not the most fun thing, but I cannot wait for a big ass thank you on day 76.
yeah, I might just fly down to Florida and kick your ass after we get done with this, if anything.
Oh man. Well, we're just coming off of a first episode of ours. So a misconception is, the podcast is obviously called Business with the Boys, but the boys are just Landon and I, right? The guests can be guys, guests can be gals, and we had our very first female guest, Sara Charlton, and it was really cool. It's further confirmation, Landon, and we mentioned this briefly in the show, is when people experience success in their life, it's not like a perfect roadmap from I went to school and I did this and this and this and this, and it all build off of each other. It's like lefts and rights and ups and downs and zigs and zags. And her story certainly emphasize that as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think much like myself, right? Prior, you go back 15 short years, I don't think anyone who knew me at that point in time probably would have said, well, he'll be alive in 15 years. Probably a better chance he's going to be in prison in 15 years. And here we are, right? I mean, it's, yeah, like you said, growth can sometimes be ugly, whether that's personally, professionally, and the road's not always easy, but it is always worth it, right? So, yeah, cool story on
100%.
how she kind of came around and went from a, rather prestigious school in Creighton here in Omaha to getting her teeth kind of kicked in and fired and getting a dose of the real world, moving back in with the parents, and then saying, screw it, I'm going to go be a ski bum to, now kind of being the number two in family organization that's kicking ass and taking names. Pretty cool.
Yeah, we went in a bunch of different directions. It was cool to hear her experience and also, what it's like being a female in a very blue collar industry. And
Male dominated field.
yeah, and I'm smirking because, if you can see what I'm looking at for those of you listening. So we have an intake form for all of our guests that, it's their name and their number and their website and their socials and their how they want to be introduced, like their bio. And there's a
We
stark
don't really have
difference.
socials on there, do we?
Social media, bro.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, what's your social security number? Trust me, bro. Um, but it's been interesting, which I didn't really think much of it, but like, everyone we've had on up to this point, they're like, in terms of bio, they're like, I'm David DeSell. It's like, okay, not really giving me much to go off of there. But Sarah gave us a legit bio, and I was like, wow, she's got her shit together. Not that the guys that have been on the show do not
Female.
have their shit together, but let's just say more organized. So I'm gonna do her the solid because she took the time typing this up. I am gonna read this well written bio, and then we're gonna dive into the episode. So with that said, Sarah was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On a scholarship, she completed her bachelor's degree at Creighton University, where she also found success as an intern at Northwestern Mutual. And you'll find out that that success at Northwestern stopped as an intern. And she went there full time and realized it wasn't a good fit, but that did not stop her. She was also a sports editor in the paper in Omaha, the World Herald. And she was looking for her next venture after being let go at Northwestern. And she decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to be a ski bum for a year in Vail, Colorado. And she ended up interviewing actually on a chairlift for a position. And then after that, she was recruited to be basically a badass salesperson at a Google funded SaaS company, and was promoted a number of times over the course of a year, in which we go into. But then she saw the writing on the wall, and saw that she had reached her ceiling there, and the company wasn't going to continue growing as it had. So she decided to take the leap of faith and join her father's firm that specializes in equipment leasing in the machine tool space. And after automating the marketing for the firm, she started learning how to close finance deals underneath her dad. And then when COVID hit, she went and got her MBA so she could become more in tune in the finance space. And she was mentored under Susan Conrad, who's a former director and board member at Lululemon, in a year-long leadership program. And with those skills, she elevated her career in the machine tool space. Last couple of years, she's averaged nearly 30 million in volume in loans placed personally, not the company. The company does like 65 to 100 million every year, but yeah, 30 million herself, serving machine shops and other manufacturers around the US and Canada. And she's negotiated transactions with other countries like Europe and Asia, and other American-based companies as well. And at the end of the day, her real passion is hanging out with the customers in the machine shops and learning about what they make. I was telling her a story about a client that I went to visit, where you see how much work is put into making steel rebar that you never see because it's inserted inside the concrete. And it's like, shit, she gets to see a lot of cool stuff for parts for Boeing and SpaceX and GM and other big manufacturers. And really her goal is to keep funding American-made products, and impacting as many families as she can along the way, while still very much so having fun between skiing and mountain biking and yoga and all that stuff. So with that said, let's dive into the episode. Let's learn from Sara and hear her story. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That mean you really playing with your life. I'm about to come and run it all back. Well, Sara, what's kind of interesting, when we dive in, I was, going through the bio that you shared, and I didn't realize this in our first conversation, but I feel like, Landon, we kind of got to be mindful of this moving forward. I feel like almost every guest that we've had on has started out at Northwestern, where we started out. So
kind of crazy, but yes, Sara and I go back to the old blue blood days as well. Yes.
It's so wild.
What
right? Yes. But what's cool about it is there's either something that attracts a certain type of person to Northwestern, or they spin out a certain type of person where you have a lot of success and you're doing cool things, and you don't necessarily need to retire there to be successful. But I guess, Sara, to get us kickstarted, I know this is general to start, but give us a sense of your background. So you started at Northwestern, you grew up, or you were born in Milwaukee, so that kind of makes sense, Northwestern being based there. But give us a sense as to your background, and we'll interject along the way and ask questions.
Totally. So yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee, suburban girl up there. And I ended up going to Creighton University in Omaha on an academic scholarship. So that was awesome. I grew up to a nurse, my mom, and my dad was a small business owner. So that was my experience there. At Creighton, I was heavily involved in things. Becoming an intern at NML was one of them. I was in the class with Landon, so I saw him, crush it there. And I was in the Omaha office. So actually after college, I got job offers at Northwestern Mutual in Omaha, in Denver, and then in Milwaukee as well. And I ended up taking the Milwaukee job thinking I wanted to move home or, whatever. That didn't last long, to be honest. I got canned 60 days in. So I ended up moving literally back into my parents' house and loaded up.
Not what your definition of moving back home was. You didn't mean literally. I'm assuming it was more just be close to family, not in their basement.
Yeah, it was not exactly the picture of success I had. especially leaving Creighton, you know, everyone gets really reputable jobs coming out of there since it's such a good school. So I decided to load up my Volvo, move to Vail, Colorado, become a ski bum. And on the way out the door, literally said to my dad, corporate America is not for me. I'm going to go try my luck in the mountains, and headed out there. So
what was that like? I mean, you were what, 21, 22 at the
yeah,
time, and you just said, screw it, I'm going cross state lines and figuring it out. Like, did you have any plan whatsoever, or did you just have your equipment and warm clothes to be able to, go up and down the
yeah.
mountain?
Yeah, no, so I was a ski racer in high school. That was my sport. So I always wanted to like live out west. But my parents definitely were like, what the fuck are you doing, Sarah? So I actually went out there with my mom, and I got a job at Surefoot, the ski boot. It's like the #1 ski boot store in the village. And then we toured a bunch of like flop houses that I was going to live at. So I ended up living in this like 3-bedroom condo with 4 people. I shared the master suite with another girl, Boz. Yeah, so it was like that for sure.
It's
That's
like reverting back to college almost, like freshman year days,
It
like
was, yeah, University of
room it
Vail.
up.
I was a
Yeah.
freshman. The only difference is working at Surefoot, like it was definitely high pressure sales and it was commission based. So, and these ski boots were like $2,000 a pop. So it was almost weird because I put myself back in this like serious environment when all my friends were like bartending, you know, skiing all the time, you know.
Bartending, bud tending,
Yeah,
shredding,
yeah,
living the
yeah.
best life on
I
$4
had
an
a friend
hour.
who was like on the Obama campaign. So he was just,
Oh yeah.
you know, hitting his bong and living off his dad's cash.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone had their own situation. Like for me, I've always been a hustler. So it just, even that season, I wasn't like bumming around.
That's great. What's interesting, Landon, as I hear Sarah, because the listeners don't necessarily know yet, but like currently you're crushing it. You're part of the family business. You're in line to most likely, hopefully, become the successor of that business. And you average about 30 million in volume for the loans that you provide to companies, and we're going to get into all that, of course. But Landon, it's interesting, like thinking through all the guests that we've had on and understanding that like there is no standardized path to success. Like there's lefts and rights and ups and downs and curveballs and zigzags and fall downs and pickups and everything along the way. And it's just, Sarah, your confirmation that there doesn't have to be a standard path to success.
Yeah, I
There
mean,
is no standard path. There is no standard look for an entrepreneur. There is no standard anything, is what we are figuring out for sure.
yeah, I mean, I moved to Vail 10 years ago and now I own a home in Vail. You know, not many people, I don't know. It's cool. I noticed that for sure.
Love it.
And how long were you kind of ski bumming it, working at that store
Yeah.
before your next step? Because you were recruited by a Google funded SaaS company.
Yeah.
What prompted that? Was that through networking? Like, how did you even get on their radar?
Yeah. So this is funny. So actually, the Northwestern Mutual Denver office heard I was living in Vail. And so the dude that interviewed me before started like texting me and emailing me. And I was like, you know, like, I'm not really down. If you want to come up here and like ski with me, we can talk on the chairlift, but that's the most I'm going to give to you, guy. Like, and sure enough, he showed up and we skied and he offered me a job in the parking garage. And so I moved to Denver. And then from there, I got recruited by Signpost, that Google company. I was their 7th employee in Denver. When I left, we had 250 people in our office in Denver. I was promoted 4 times there. So it was like the quickest track of any girl that had entered that firm other than one of my dear friends, Lizzie. So that was a really cool experience to kind of boiler room, cold calling, selling,
Figure it out, bootstrap it, go.
Yeah, it was weirdly a step down from NML, but I took the chance to get equity in a company and potentially IPO. And I was 26, so it didn't matter. I was feeding myself and my cat and my dog. Like,
Little easier to
cares,
take those
you know?
risks at that stage, right?
Yeah, who cares? And so yeah, a year and a half into that, I just realized there was a ceiling there and they weren't going to IPO. And so that's when the opportunity with my dad kind of came together.
So before we get into the opportunity with your dad, I'm curious to know what did, I think you said Signpost, like I haven't heard of them. What did they do? And you said you got promoted 4 times.
Where'd you start and where'd you end?
Yeah, and what do you think you did to earn those promotions? Like there's a lot of lessons and takeaways there that I do not want to skip over.
Totally. Yeah. And I definitely, the one thing too, I want to add, just to go back to Vail quickly. It was just the best piece of sales advice I use to this day from that boot store. The Vail shop is actually the original guy who started Surefoot, which is now $1 billion ski boot company and running company. Him and his brother started it in Park City. So Russ runs the Vail shop. And he would tell us like, hey, sell these ski boots like you're selling a turkey sandwich. And I kid you not, I'll be going into a close for like $1 million loan, like a bit nervous, talking to these big wigs. And I just remember that in my head. And then of course I closed the deal. So it's cool,
So how do you sell a turkey sandwich? Help me understand.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
So basically what he's saying is when someone comes into a store, you're assuming the close. You just get them exactly what they want, right?
I gotcha. Yeah, and anticipating their needs, to a degree. Love it. So back to the So what was the company like? What did they do? And then how do you think, or what do you think you did to earn those promotions 4 times? And I think it was like a year or 2 years. Like it was in short order.
Yeah. So the thing about tech startups that I realized is they always try to solve a problem at that time, right? So right now there's a bunch of AI tech startups or EV tech startups in manufacturing, green manufacturing tech startups, right? So at that time in 2011, all the tech startups were marketing companies doing like Google AdWords, Yelp, all that shit. If you know any small business owner, they've gotten 1 million of those calls saying like, do you want to be number 1 on Google? Mm-hmm. So it's like one of those firms, right? And so to get promoted, you literally had to just hit metrics. So you were closing like a certain amount of deals. And I'm so ruthless. Like I just made it a video game. And it got to the point where I would be talking to somebody for like, kid you not, they've never spoken to me before. And I'm talking to them for 6 minutes. And they're giving me their Amex for like $5,000 for some like marketing bullshit online, like it was like boiler room like that. And so the people that were succeeding were just like honestly making it a game. And that's kind of like the underlying thing with everything and success that I've realized is you really have to just remain unattached to that outcome and just keep grinding and keep doing your best. And if you keep doing that, like obviously every day that looks different, you're going to be successful,
I think, so when I'm working with folks who have some sort of sales aspect to what they do, the whole gamification or making it like a game, just to build on that a little bit, like even things like if you're looking to make a certain amount of dials, just as an example, or outreaches, it's like there's been silly things like have 2 jars, one has 100 marbles in it, and don't get up from your desk until all those marbles are in the other jar. Like whatever silly games, that's what I'm finding as a commonality amongst folks who are successful is whatever it is they're doing, they gamify it. And it's just interesting that you say that as well. It's just further confirmation that that's what they do is and detach themselves from the outcome and trusting the process of the input, that
Yeah.
they're putting into it.
Yeah. And like when I started working for them, we are literally like in a closet of another company downtown Denver, 7 of us making 200 phone calls a day, hoping we could like pay the mortgage in this bullshit office, And then by the end, we are in like a 2-story bougie building by Coors Field in Rhino. And, it was just cool to see that scale for sure. But when you have 225-year-olds, the sales manager is like, yeah, whoever is the best in sales this month, like I'll buy you a pair of Jordans. So it was always like stuff like that,
That
He knew
sounds
his
like the
audience.
proverbial tech company for sure.
Yeah,
The
like
Wolf
he
of
knew his
Wall
audience.
Street vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we had a keg, it was all that.
how did this thing end then, Sarah?
I think they're still chugging along. I
Are they?
technically still have stock in their company, so I'm definitely rooting for them, but I don't honestly know. I haven't followed. All my friends have since left and moved on to other things from there. So
Gotcha. So then talk to us about the transition from there to the family business. Well, how did that come about? Did you start the conversation? Did your father engage you? What did you guys kind of come up with for a game plan to bring you into that business, and where'd you start and
yeah,
start there, I guess?
yeah. So I interviewed with his business partner at the time, this guy named Matt, and I was just like, I knew I was reaching a ceiling and I didn't know my next move. And my dad's company, like had always been financing machine tools. And so his name in the industry is solid, right? Like he has integrity, ethics. That's how my grandfather was successful. It's like all you have is your name and your integrity, right? So he never did any outbound marketing. He had like Excel spreadsheets and shit running his back office, right? And so his partner was like, well, if Sarah's working at this like company that, is a tech company, she should come and like help us get up to date on everything. And so I literally started as a marketing like director, I guess, but I was working 20 hours a week. They're paying me like 20 or $25 an hour. Like it wasn't flashy. So I kind of started at the bottom and had to prove myself. And then I built a Salesforce CRM. I don't know if you're familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up like working with this developer in Denver and like automating our whole back office and our whole marketing process. And so I pretty much didn't have anything to do then. And
Worked
so
yourself out of a job. That's good.
yeah. And so I was like, okay, Dad, like show me how to close a deal. And so then I just started doing deals under him. And yeah, I went from there.
It's interesting how they're like, oh, Sarah works at a tech company. She can help us with our tech stuff. And you're probably thinking to yourself, I'm just banging the phone, selling shit. Like, I don't
Yeah.
actually know how to do any of the tech stuff necessarily, but it's cool where you're just like, yeah, screw it. I'll help. And then you
Figure
figure
it
it
out.
out and it's like what should be done. You just need to find the people and the resources and the tools to get it done and kind of bring that in. But before we go too far down the path of, kind of like your role and journey, first
Yeah,
let's pause and tell us what the business is. What's the name of the business? What you guys provide?
totally.
Things like that.
Yeah. So the business is called Tech Financial Services, a division of Five Lakes Financial Inc. So that's our S Corp. We finance machine tools. So it's a bit of a niche market.
When you say machine tools, kind of clarify that for the audience, if you would, Sarah.
Totally. Yeah. So a machine tool is like a job shop would use a machine to cut metal, bend metal, stamp, things like this,
Like a
right?
CNC plasma type machine, those
Yeah,
types of.
laser, a
Yep.
shear, a metal cutter.
Yep.
The brands would be like a Haas or a Mazak or a Zeiss or a Makino. There's a million brands, Citizen, Mitsubishi,
Yep.
So my dad started Tech Financial 20 years ago, right? Before that, he started the leasing company at Mazak, which is the biggest machine tool builder in the world currently. My grandfather helped start the first importer of Mazak in Chicago. And so that's our family history in the industry. So 25 years ago, my pops pulled a Jerry Maguire at Mazak, grabbed his number 2 guy and his intern, put our house up, started tech finance, got an office in my grandpa's building downtown Milwaukee. My mom went back to working full time so she could get healthcare benefits. So we were covered as kids. And, he went to town. So, it was like that. I was 12 years old when he did that. So
Love it.
yeah.
Rolled the dice and said, let's do this, huh? Bet the house, literally.
Yeah. My sister was starting college in a couple of years. We were all, we went to Catholic grade schools, and my brother went to a Catholic high school. So it was definitely a ballsy move on his part, just believing in himself and just knowing that his word and integrity would carry him through,
Yeah. So what is what's the landscape of tech financial look like today? I mean, so obviously it sounds like the 3 of them, him and his number 2 and an intern, started it. What does it look like today?
Yeah, so we have a sales team in Milwaukee. So I'm technically on the sales team. I'm our top producer. And then we have a couple other guys there, Christy, actually a woman, and then Kobe. And then we also have a full back office, processing paperwork, funding loans, what have you, accounting, things like that. And then my dad he goes in every day but Friday. We told him to take off. So he's still there most of the time.
Probably had to make him take off Friday too, if he's a typical business owner.
Yeah. Well, he's what he taught us in our family, especially, and the whole company really is work hard, play hard. So he has a dirt bike thing. So if he's not working, he's riding his dirt bike with his buddies. Yeah, it's crazy. Actually, at 65, he'll go out to Moab and do just this honestly scary shit. So
keeps him young. I love it.
Yeah.
So do you guys have an actual banking arm behind you, or that you guys own a bank, or how are you securing the funding for these loans? What does all that look like?
So that's a great question, Lynn. So it's kind of in the mortgage space, there's these guys, that'll put a shingle out and they'll be closing deals from their kitchen and just selling paper, what I call, to every bank you and I know, right? And so that's just brokering deals. And we can do that. I do a lot of business that way. But then also we do have stock in a small national bank. My dad actually helped start this bank with a couple of his buddies. The CEO went to high school with my mom. And so that's interesting. They got together and started this bank. So we have stock in that bank. And so that puts us at a unique situation where we're able to fund tougher credits, startups. I have a lot of guys in the Midwest, especially, you can relate to this, Landon, who are 22, have a great idea, hardworking as fuck,
0 credit.
No, they'll have a 700 FICO, but they'll be young.
Yeah, they don't have any experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
And so all those guys are going to pay. They're going to pay me well. And they're also going to advocate for me. And they love that I've helped them out, and that's been the biggest impact for me, is just seeing these guys grow and being the reason why they're able to now get a contract with Boeing or SpaceX or GM or Caterpillar or a big boy, because we took that chance. And I'm able to rely, on my dad's 40 years of experience, knowing what kind of business is going to fail and which one's going to make it,
Yeah.
Well, you and I were talking too on our intro call. So I was like, what's the difference between, you and someone just going directly to a bank? And your answer was overly, in a good way, direct. You were like, well, we actually know about these businesses. These banks don't. So we know if it's if we're able to take the quote unquote risk because it's more of a calculated risk versus a bank. They don't look at it through the same lens. So it's interesting, the niche that you've been able to carve out for yourself.
Dude, it's so cool too. Like I was in LA in January, right? And I got dinner with this guy and his wife. And he moved to the US 10 years ago with this idea. He didn't know what the hell he was going to do. And he was buying a machine for his shop. He needed a loan. We did it ourselves. He said all these banks said no to him, right? And he showed me this PO from Boeing that was like millions upon millions of dollars. And he started tearing up and he's like, I had no idea like this is what my American dream would look like, and I've since financed like every machine in his shop. And it's obviously today a way easier deal to get done. And his rate's way better today. But yeah, it's like it's just that's the real deal. And that's what helps me just like stay optimistic. At the end of the day, like people who are working hard, it's all
Yeah,
gonna like,
investing in the American dream is a badass thing, right? Like I
yeah.
know my mom and dad shared stories. My dad and my uncle currently, since my dad has passed, own a welding machine shop. And when they were young and hungry and wanted to start this thing, again, just like you said, Midwest, all they really had was a work ethic. They didn't really have any proven experience behind them, and they found it really hard to find a bank to take a risk on them. And ultimately they did. A real small town bank actually said, you know what, we know you guys personally, we'll take a risk on you. And I know that as long as my dad was still alive, they maintained accounts with that small bank. And it was like, well, now that you guys have some history and everything else, other banks kind of wanted to come in and participate, and their loyalty to them was kind of like, nah, get bent. You guys didn't want to talk to us when we started. We'll stick over here with the small shop. And so that goes a long ways for sure.
Well, and that's what's unique about us too, is realistically, depending on who I'm working with, if I can get access to a tier one rate at a US bank or a, top bank, that's a bad example because their rates aren't the best right now, but you know what I'm saying? Like a top tier bank. And if I can
Yeah,
get access,
Chase, Wells, any of those.
yeah,
Yep.
something like that. And prime is 8.5. So a small town bank is going to give that guy prime +1 or, and I'm in the sevens because I'm on the wholesale market. It's cool to be able to just access that for folks too and get that for them.
What was it like? And I'm being very assumptive here, that this was even a challenge or an issue, but like if I were to guess, I picture you're working with blue collar businesses, right?
Yeah.
And you're a female in a blue collar business. I would imagine that there was some sort of friction or maybe roadblocks that you had to overcome, or maybe I'm just being incredibly assumptive and you're like, no, it's literally not a big deal. But what was your experience trying to get into and serve sort of a guy's guy type of industry?
Totally. I will say when I started a decade ago, I'd go to trade shows and the girls were always like the secretaries or like the hot girl in the booth to like get the guys to come in the booth. And so that's kind of tacky, but it seems like that stuff has since kind of curbed down as more women have gotten in the space. But also for me, I found that I have this weird ability, Landon knows from back in the day. If someone gives me shit, I'm just going to give it back to them. And so I haven't had that many experiences where, I've dealt with outright sexism really. I have
No,
had,
because if you do, you're just gonna deal it right back. Like that's just it.
yeah,
You're not sensitive to it. It's just like shut the
yeah,
hell up. I'll bust your balls right back, right? Like that's one thing I've always loved about you is like
yeah,
you fit
yeah,
into the
yeah.
quote unquote boys club with zero issues. And yeah, I think that's a good quality to have. Like you don't internalize anything. It's like you said, it's you keep that separate and it's just it is what it is. Let's go to work, right?
Yeah, like my grandfather grew up in a small ass town in Wisconsin of 500 people, right? He was the first guy to go to college in his town. So I come from like a blue collar, quote unquote, family. Like he grew up in a tar paper shack, you know? So my outlook has always been, a champion for the little guy. And so also just having that perspective and just getting the advice early on in my career, like if you're a woman in business, if you want to be respected, like dress respectfully and all the things that, like, unfortunately as a woman you have to be cognizant of, but it really hasn't been that big of a deal. And the funniest example I can have is I had this sales guy from, like, I don't know, somewhere in the Midwest. I won't even pigeonhole a state, but he would call me, and every time he'd call, he'd be like, "Hey, gorgeous, how's your day?" Like in this like weird, and this was like a guy my dad's age. So it wasn't like, I don't know, it just was creepy, right? And so I was thinking about like how I could approach this without being too aggressive, because that's also something I've, just you got to be cognizant of. I don't want to come off as some like crazy bitch. And so I decided one day when he did it, I was like, I just said, "Oh, it's Sara." And that was all I said. And he literally never did it again. And so I found that less is more with that kind of stuff, at least with my experience. So,
Love it.
Yeah, that's interesting that yeah, sometimes I feel like I hear stories where I'm like, really? He said that? Like, what makes him think that that's
Okay.
okay, you
In any
know?
world. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And so that's like the
Or you say when he's like, "Hey, gorgeous," you're like, "Hey, I'm doing great. How's your wife doing?" Just,
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
remind
like,
him like, "Hey, you got a wife, bro. Like, shut the fuck
yeah.
up."
Yep.
Oh
Yeah, no,
man.
but or even saying like, "Why would you say that to me?" Like
Yeah.
that's been such a powerful question, and it's not like, I don't know. It's been fine.
Okay, good. Well, it seems like there was just one instance, so I think you'll live. It's not like it's an everyday occurrence, which is what I was kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
curious about. What what sort of, I guess, so let's say someone's listening to this and they have a manufacturing company.
Yeah.
As you're evaluating a deal, whether or not something should be funded, like what are some of the qualifications or underwriting parameters that you look for to, I guess, what are the top things that increase the likelihood that you can fund the loan? And what are some of the top things that will squash the deal that people should be looking out for?
Totally. So, I got an MBA during COVID. So if it's a deal over $1 million or over 750, I'll look at their fins and do a spread, right? So that's a different conversation, but I'll talk about like a smaller deal under 750 grand. And in that case, if they're a business under 10 years, their personal credit is going to be looked at. And if you're under a 650 FICO, like that's a deal killer. Um, and then as far as like business credit worthiness, a secret rule of thumb is if you've borrowed money in the past as a company, if you've paid on 2/3 of the amount you're applying for, it's going to be an automatic approval in most cases. Um, and if you've never borrowed money before, if you can show that you've been profitable, I get deals done all the time for guys that are doing 400 or 500 grand a year in revenue, have a couple employees, and are applying for 125 grand or 200 grand. Like that deal's getting approved all day.
Understood. And are these people finding you, or you guys in the sales team kind of cold calling and getting on their radar? Are you guys going to trade shows? Like, how are you actually developing your business? Because you're doing 30 million in volume on average yourself, never mind
Yeah.
the rest of the sales
The other
team.
guys. Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Yeah, we do like 100. I would say 65 to 100 a year, but yeah, so basically luckily I haven't had to cold call since I left that startup, so that's awesome. um but yeah, we basically have, I mean, Mark has such a good reputation, and when he started Tech Financial, it was literally him and four other guys starting firms, and of those four original guys, one guy sold to a private equity group, one guy, actually two of them did, Another guy gave it to his kid, and they sold to a bank. So we're the only one left that's like Mark owns 100%. And so people like that. We get our deals from dealers mainly. So the Haas dealer, the Citizen dealer, the YCM dealer, the Washiam dealer. We have certain partnerships with certain dealers of certain brands. And so we work in
So
both.
you're like a preferred lender for some of these manufacturing
So the like the easiest analogy is like when you go and buy a new Lexus, the guy in the little room, if they say talk to him.
Yep. Get that. What's like the top end kind of lending that you'll do?
Like the biggest deal.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll
you cap
we'll
it out
do
at 5 million. Is it a
We don't really have a top, but I will say machine pricing tops out at like $1.5 million if they're looking for a loan. If a guy's buying like a $3 million machine, he usually is paying cash. Weirdly.
damn?
But yeah, so because it's like if a guy that's like a Caterpillar or a, like a big ass.
Yeah, that's a big
not
piece of
like
equipment, obviously.
Yeah, it's not like Joe's welding shop buying a machine like that. Like, for example, the biggest machine I ever saw, the guy was making like plane bodies, right? Like the tube of
Fuselage.
Yeah. So, but that's the coolest part of the job is walking in to the machine shop in my pumps and my, business dress, my OSHA goggles, and checking shit out. It's really cool.
Well, I was just in Nebraska to see one of our clients that we work with on the exit planning consulting side, and they make steel rebar and fasteners, nuts and bolts, and it's I was walking through the shop and I didn't have my pumps on that day, Sarah, but I was walking through the shop, and it was like 60,000 square feet. And it's just amazing to see, like the two things that stuck out to me was some of the machines that they use are they're like machines, like they're 60 years old.
Oh yeah.
Like they last a long time, and they even have a maintenance guy that will manufacture their own parts to fix stuff. And so just like the longevity of these machines, because you think about like, oh, $1 million, $1.5 million, like, shit, how often does that need to be replaced? And it's like, well, you take care of it and you replace shit like not that often. They can last for a very, very long time. The other thing that was wild to see is like how big the machine is that makes nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Like it was mind blowing. So I can imagine whether it's because you mentioned, stuff with Boeing and SpaceX and GM and, so cars and planes and spaceships, and being able to walk through and see that stuff must be pretty wild to see, like how things you take for granted, like, you're more worried about what boarding group you're in on an airplane than like how the airplane's actually made. And you get to go see that type of stuff, which must be neat.
And these days you should probably be more concerned with how that bird is made.
Yes.
Than not when there's doors and shit flying off of them for sure. But yes.
100%.
Well, yeah, it's like I know the guy who made the landing gear, It's like, am I gonna be cool, dude? Of course.
Well, it is pretty cool. And I know anytime I visit you, Landon, because I feel like Nebraska is such a well-kept secret of cool shit and wealth. And you're like, oh yeah, that guy over there does this, or that guy over there does that. And I'm like, no shit. Like and that's your neighbor. That's someone that you play pickleball with. Like, really? So it's always cool to hear how people kind of make their money and make their impact off of like random shit that you take for granted. Like the client that we have who does like the steel rebar, it's like you don't even see the shit that he makes because it's inside of concrete.
It's not sexy, but somebody's got to make it.
Exactly.
It's something that's a necessity.
Even when you think about like things at a national level, like when people on TV will say like GM is gonna do this, or like things like that. It's like, okay, well, they have to get together 2,000 little shops all around the country and get them all on board, so it's cool to see that it's not really up to DC, it's up to these guys. And what's interesting now is I see that with American made machines, guys right now don't want to buy machines from certain countries, right? Because think about it, these countries will say, we want 90% of our money before this thing leaves Turkey or China or India or XYZ, wherever it's leaving from, Poland. And so people are like, no, I don't want to do business with somebody that's not in the US. And I'm seeing that happen more and more. And so it's like realizing that it's not really decisions at a macro level, it's decisions being made at a micro level that can change,
Yeah, it's cool that, I mean, no matter what anybody says, I know all these big companies can move the needle, but it's like you said, the true heartbeat and lifeblood of our country is still in small business ownership. Little entrepreneurs all across the country. We employ more people than the Amazons, like that's still the reality. And I love that.
Well, even going back to the guy I met in LA, my favorite all-time customer, right? He's now telling these big guys, no, you want me to machine this? These are my terms, right? And then in the beginning, it wasn't like that, because it's like how Walmart is. Like, you're going to work with Elon or work with any of these big boys. They're going to give you net 45. They're not going to give you what you want, right? And so just to get to that level, because you're like, I'm a badass machinist, and I know no one else in the US is going to deliver this product, it's cool to be in that position.
It's also going back to one thing you shared about how people are starting to want to do business with US based companies and manufacturers. I remember growing up as a kid, it was like people would go out of their way to buy made in America stuff. Like I had an uncle, Uncle
In Nebraska,
Gus.
people still do go
Well,
out of their way to buy
I'm
made in
getting
America stuff.
there.
Don't have a
But
Ford, David. Don't have Ford.
well, so my Uncle Gus, like he would not buy anything that was made anywhere except for the US. And that's when I remember that vividly from when I was like 6 years old. And then as life goes on, like more stuff gets to be outsourced, and you realize, like, I remember I bought an American flag one 4th of July, and it said made in China. I'm like, the fuck is this?
Get this
Like
out of here.
that makes, like, that should be a law. Like you can't,
Agreed.
but I've gotten the sense, and maybe Nebraska's never changed, but I've gotten the sense that generally people are gravitating more towards American made stuff again, which is, again, kind of confirmed with what you just shared, Sarah. Like people are wanting to do business with American companies more so than folks overseas.
Totally. Yeah. Because I feel like too, in general, right, things were getting really global, right? Globalism was a big idea a few years ago. And now a lot of countries are realizing, frankly, because of COVID and other things, I think that, like, oh shit, we got to figure stuff out domestically, because otherwise, inflation, supply chain, all that stuff just is crazy.
100%. We can leave. I would love to go down the path of other things, but I feel like that would take up the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, no,
But we all know what we're thinking.
I'm trying to have a chill Friday here. So.
Yeah.
Oh man. What's it been like? What's it been like working with your dad? Like the dynamics, like I would imagine it's a mixture of like you fucking love it and you fucking hate it, and I guess I don't know. I've never worked with my dad. I love my dad. I don't know if we'd work well together. I'd like to think we would, but what
My
has
dad
it
would have
actually
beat my
been?
ass multiple times. I know that.
Well, that's because you deserve it, but
Absolutely, every time. Every
Yeah,
time.
he
Like
definitely deserves it. Yeah, so I mean, it's been awesome. It's been the hardest and the best job I've ever had. you know, it's really, I feel really lucky that the first call every day I make is to my pops. And he's just taught me so much. And it's funny, I was in this facility, it was like 200,000 square feet, a huge, they make like train bodies, like where the conductor drives the train, right? So we're in this spot, and the guy looks at me, the president of this company, he's like, I am a very tough negotiator. You know, it's this older guy, if I had to guess, like in his 70s. He's like, your father's the best closer I've ever met. And it was just like so cool to hear that. And I realized like that's what it is. It's just being able to see how he works and how he's helped all these people and really just embodied what it means to get it done and help your neighbor and do the right thing. And he always just said, like, all you have is your integrity at the end of the day. And you can't really celebrate your win, like if you're out of alignment with that or your core values. So just living really true to that. It's just been really cool to be able to bob and weave through that. And we're both able to be like fully expressed and call each other out when need be. But yeah, it's been hard, but really cool. And also in manufacturing, there's a ton of family businesses. So it's a cool industry in that way. Like I was working with this dealer in the South, and the daughter was literally in the NICU with her baby and like took my call because I was trying to like fund a machine that they are selling. And I was like, oh my God, no, I'll call your brother. Like, so yeah, it's really special to be able to work with him. And that's honestly because he is in his late 60s. It's one of those things that I feel like at times I'm like holding on too much, like, no, I love working with you. I don't want you to go to Bahamas with my mom forever, and ride your dirt bike on a Tuesday. So yeah, it's just in a roundabout way, it's been really cool. And there's definitely been times. I think I've quit like 5 times.
Let's unpack that a little bit, Sarah. I mean, I know you say you don't want him to be gone eventually, but I mean, let's be honest, the reality is Father Time is undefeated. Have you guys had these conversations? What's this look like? What do you see as being the ultimate exit? What does he see as being the ultimate exit? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So owning a finance company, you do get approached by banks and equity groups and all that to sell. And that's definitely happened to us. At this point, what's cool is we have such a solid team with me and Kobe and Christy and everyone in the back office that Shonda, that it's at this point, he's not super involved in the day-to-day. And so it's one of those things that he's the face and he helps out in more complex situations at this time. And so I could see it happening realistically where he hands over the reins and Kobe and Christy and I run it, or, there's so many scenarios at this point. Being the VP, I guess technically I'm next in line,
Yep.
Like if Joe Biden keels over, we got Kamala, but
I mean, I'm going to keep my opinion out of that.
Yeah, no, I'm just the reference, right? So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something you're looking forward to, that you hope to do? I mean, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you've got a great relationship with your team, which obviously we all know as business owners, and it all starts with a great team, in my opinion. So, You've talked about taking these other 2 on the journey with you. I mean, is it something where the transition happens, you make an equity play to them to make sure they stick around and are by your side on that? Pops kind of giving you any direction or indication on which way he wants to go?
I think that's where we're at right now, is we're all open-minded to really various possibilities. And so it's a really powerful place to be, because frankly, all of our competition is selling out. And so for us to not have to make a decision today or tomorrow is a really cool place to be. And we're doing really well in the marketplace, and we're eating up market share day in and day out, because these other firms are turning and burning, account managers or whatever it is that they're calling the role. And so just having this position of power and having these really solid national relationships, it's kind of one of those things where it's like the bus is going to continue to roll, and whoever's around and wants to keep rolling, like, let's effing go. And I'm not trying to buy a Bentley. So like, you know, at the end of the day, if I can ski 40 days a year and mountain bike and have a kid someday and a hot husband that I can go home to every night, like, I'm
Life's good.
Yeah, like, I'm good. So it's cool to be in that position, and it gives you a lot of power. And then honestly, I've been able to close a lot of deals because I don't have an equity group to report to, or a bank board, or, you know, so I can make less on a deal to win if I have to, you know?
Yep.
And what about, I want to talk about how your industry is changing. You alluded to, you know, a lot of folks are selling out, and therefore because at first my thought was like, oh shit, like you're going to have some big boys in the industry that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and
Yeah.
you know, maybe ends up gobbling you up or taking away all the business. But it seems like, which isn't uncommon regardless of the industry, like the bigger a company gets, the less personal it can become, and people
Yeah,
miss that human component. So one of the things that I've learned is to win business, you never want to disparage your competitor,
totally.
but also how do you make it known that like, hey, we're different in these reasons, here's what you could get from those folks and why you may not like it, without like just talking shit, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest bank that's in this space is US Bank, right? Like, I have respect for them, right? But all those big banks right now, their rate, yesterday I was up against them and they quoted like 8.5, 8.39. And I quoted the guy 7.39. So honestly, our rates are just better at this point than a lot of the competition. And so we just send out a rate sheet every couple of weeks, letting folks know, you know, who we are. And because it's a $30 billion industry, but there's not many players, right? And so people, I don't want to say people know us, but just going to trade shows and sending
It's
out.
got to be a pretty small world, so they probably do know you, right? I
Yeah,
mean, your dad's been
yeah,
doing it for 20 plus years. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're
yeah,
probably a
40.
fairly household name. 40 years, yeah,
Yeah,
pretty household
yeah,
name in that space. It's manufacturing is, yeah, it's
yeah.
big, but it's a big, small
Yeah, it's
world.
like, yeah, it's like us, Mitsubishi Bank, US Bank, BMO Harris. Like, there's not that many
Players in it,
players, you
I'm
know?
surprised. I'm surprised like the equipment manufacturers themselves
right? Like
don't
GM
do
has
their
GM
own.
Financial.
Like, why don't they do their
Oh,
own financing?
okay, so backing up, that's what my father started, right? At Mazak, the biggest machine builder in the world, right? So I do technically compete against Mazak Finance at times, but I also beat them. You know, it always comes around and goes around. Like, I'm sure they beat me sometimes too.
Now, do you think that, and maybe it is the case, but like, I remember when I just closed on this house at the time of this recording, like 5, maybe 6 weeks or so ago, and there was um, two quotes or mortgage options that I had, and they were like 10 basis points away from each other.
Mhm.
And the one who was cheaper was a Randa that I was referred to, and the one that was 10 basis points higher was like my boy that I've known for
Yeah.
10 years. And it's like, Doug, I'm going to refinance this in, you know, 6 months anyways, assuming the rates go down. I don't care that you're a little bit more expensive now. I'm just going with you. Do you
Yeah, that's
find that
exactly
to you find that to be the case where like they'd rather that personal relationship um and maybe a slightly higher loan, or if someone comes in lower than you lose that business every time?
Yeah, I mean, I will fight to get them a better rate, right? I can always go back to my credit guy and say, "Can you get me a concession? This is a really good customer and I'm competing on the deal." That's always an
Mhm.
option. But yeah, you're exactly right. If you think about it, if you were buying a $500,000 machine, would you want to get that loan from a guy who put a shingle out, who's brokering the deal, you know, who may or may not have any financial backing in case things go bad, right? Because I can tell you some crazy shit that's happened in these deals. Or would you go with a company that owns a building downtown Milwaukee, has stock in a bank, has been around for 20 plus years, was referred to you by the dealer? Like, it's the same kind of thing, right? And that's why we have customers who have like 20, 30 loans with us, because as they grow, because they're all short term, right? No one's going longer than 7 years. So if you're a 40-year-old manufacturing business, you have gone through, a lot of cycles with us.
And I would imagine the underwriting over time, when you have the relationship, is way easier through you than it is through a new bank, a new loan provider who doesn't
Yeah.
know them at all, where you're like, oh yeah, I know Joe. Yeah, Joe, we'll
Yeah.
fund that, no problem.
Yeah, it's like if I know the guy, I can get it approved in like 6 hours, sometimes
Oh, no
less.
shit.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's like there's questions or they've borrowed a lot of money and there's exposure issues that maybe a day or two. Sometimes it takes up to a week if we have to shop around or certain things come up. But yeah, if you're
But
a
you know
solid
pretty quick if
guy,
you're going to approve them or not, right? Just because of your history of doing business with them, that's got to go
yeah,
a long
yeah,
ways, I would
exactly.
think.
Yeah, exactly. Or like I have a couple, because we work with a range of businesses, from like the one guy shop to the $100 million revenue shop, right? So
Yeah.
like if that latter guy applies, I'll tell him immediately, yo, this is going to be approved. Just get your numbers in order and I'll send you the docs.
Yep.
It's like, it's going to happen.
Where if they call BMO Harris, they don't know or care who that individual is, right? It's like, oh, put your name on here and give me your PFS, personal financial statement, and we'll take a look at it.
Well, and that's the other thing is if you go to a bank, like if you have a relationship, even with a big bank, you're going to have a limit with them, right? And they're going to put a blanket lien on your business. They're going to want to know more and more information. They're going to have a covenant with you, maybe that you can't get lending anywhere else. I don't do any of that. I just put a lien on the asset and call it a day.
Yep.
So it's way better and way more strategic if you're trying to grow quickly as a business, because like, for example, these fab guys, these fab shops like FAB, who are making steel, like your guy in Nebraska, right? They're
Yep.
growing really, really fast right now, that whole industry. So you could go from $0 in revenue to $8 million a year in revenue in 3-4 years if you do it right. And so if you're growing that quickly, you're going to outgrow your bank really quickly. And so if you have only that one bank doing all your stuff, they're going to say no. You're going to get into problems really quickly. Whereas if you have different things in different places, as a business owner, that insulates you from risk and it gives you the flexibility as you grow. It's like you're not going to put all your money at Silicon Valley Bank, right? Because then when they fail,
Hopefully not. Then the US government bails you out, but yes.
I remember when that was happening, I was like, oh, it sucks to suck. And then my bank, First Republic, went under, and I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Sucks to suck.
I'm part of that.
And I
That was
also
funny at our level, just talking to some of the guys, like, because some of those banks in New York I work with, and it was just like, oh, business as usual. And I was like, what is going on? It is not business as usual. And then sure enough, it's like their signature line changed and they're a different bank the next day. And
well, it kind of is business as usual, because I feel
no,
like that whole
exactly. It's just
space
funny.
is like moving money from your right pocket to your left pocket, back to your right pocket,
and then charging you a bunch of fees in the middle.
Yeah.
Go crypto.
I'm curious. I'm curious, Sarah, you've had, let's just say, an interesting journey, right? You go from, thinking you're going to be a financial advisor to screw this, I'm going to go be a ski bum, to selling ski boots, to selling a shitload of software, to then, getting in the finance space and the manufacturing industry with the family business. Like you've gone all over the place, which is really cool to see kind of what led you to here. And you've already made mention of the fact that your dad has been a mentor of yours and has taught you about, integrity, and your name and your reputation is everything. But I'm sure he wasn't the only person in your life that you'd consider a mentor of yours, who are some other folks, whether it be formal mentorship or like I consider people's whose podcasts I listen to and books I read to be kind of pseudo mentors of mine, and they have no idea that they even are.
Yeah.
Who are some mentors of yours, and what's some of the takeaways you've had in your interactions with them or the content they produce?
Yeah. So when I first started working for my dad, I got really into yoga in Denver. And so I learned a ton from my yoga teachers in that community, and ended up meeting a woman named Suzanne Conrad. Her brother-in-law started Lululemon, the athletic wear company. And so she ended up mentoring me more than really anyone on my journey. So that has had like a profound impact on my journey more than anything. So I was getting an MBA in Denver, right? Just to tighten up my finance stuff.
Acumen.
Yeah, as I scale this ladder, which grad level accounting is no joke. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna, sorry to interject, but when I first went to college, I was like, I'm gonna double major in finance and accounting. And I took my first accounting class, and I was like, I'm gonna major in finance. Fuck
Yeah.
accounting.
Yeah, no, I was a poli sci at Creighton, so nowhere near. But I definitely had to meet with the assistant dean, if I'm being honest, in my MBA program during that accounting course. So yeah, tough stuff. But Suzanne, Suzanne also ended up mentoring me once a week for a year during my final year of my MBA program. So that was really unique and cool to have that kind of happening at the same time. And what's interesting about her is after she left Lululemon, she's worked with major corporations, IBM, other guys on leadership and holding a vision for your future, things like that, right? So the biggest thing I learned from her is as you step into leadership, you want to bring your full self, whatever you're doing, into that space, right? And you're able to use that as an edge. So when I first started working for my dad, right, all his sales guys were middle-aged white guys, upper middle class, the same like vanilla suit, right? We're all, whatever. And so I was nervous that like, I can't fit into this box. Like, what am I going to do? Right. And so I realized when I started working my edges, like straight up during COVID, when these machine guys were freaking the fuck out, I would say, hey, guy, go do some yoga, go do some meditation. And next thing you know, they're like thanking me for this. And I'm thinking like 6 months ago, I would not be talking like this to these people, And so by learning that from her, being able to bring my full self in each and every day, it's honestly propelled me to this like new level, right? Where I'm outproducing most people in my field.
So what's interesting about that, so recently, let's just say I've been or I was for a little bit like in a bit of a rut, like just like mindset wise, like or call it like a funk. Like I didn't have the usual like spunk or swag that I like to hold myself out as and live day to day. And without like how should I say, like I found that when work is going really well, but your personal life or your health isn't, you just kind of like feel off kilter. And
Totally.
when your personal life and your fitness and whatnot is going really well, but you're not making any money, obviously you feel off kilter. And it was, as I like reflected back, I'm like, why am I in this funk? Why am I in this funk? And I had used starting with the holidays as an excuse, then bleeding into, oh, we're looking for a house, and that's a lot to take on, to then the mortgage process, which was a lot, to then moving into the house and all that. And then before you know it, it's like 3 months pass, and I hadn't been going to the gym like I normally was. And that's why, we had talked about it at the beginning of the call and before we started recording, like Landon and I are doing 75 hard. And it's like literally on day one of 75 hard, as I'm like bitching and complaining to my friends and family about like my feelings and why I feel like I'm in the rut, I called them all literally, and I was like, hey, if I ever call you and vent or bitch or about the way I'm feeling, like tell me to go do 1 day's worth of 75 hard and then call, because literally after that first day, I was like, oh, I feel great. So all that to say, I think what I really like about what you said is not only do I agree with it and believe in that, but the person at US Bank is not going to go tell them to do that shit and have an impact on their life outside of financing a damn machine. Like financing a machine for all intents and purposes isn't sexy, but it's helpful. And if you're able to help them in other areas of their life, you're getting that business over and over again. And all those people know each other, and they're going to send you business because they're going to be able to say, hey, not only are they going to help you finance your machine, but Sara also helped me with X and Y and Z. Maybe they won't admit that they're doing yoga to their guy friend, but
Well,
and
and
it's
my
not
thing
even,
is like Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, is you're seeing a lot of manufacturing shit come across your desk, right? And just businesses in general. Like, I know this is true in my world because I work with business owners, right? And David's the same way. The amount of introductions that we can make through our network, right? Like, you could be working with a guy that makes a fuselage of a plane, but you sold another guy that makes the damn propellers, a machine on the other side, and it's like, hey, y'all
the
are
bank's not
top,
doing that. A
right?
big
Yeah, they're
bank's
not
not doing
doing that,
that.
right? And the shit that we don't get paid to do per se, in my opinion, is what makes us more valuable than anything. I know from David and I's experience, like we're just natural connectors. Like when I see a badass guy or gal that I work with and I meet someone else that I'm like, y'all need to meet, like I'll just make that. I mean, there's no expectation there. I'm just making that just to make that connection, right?
Yeah, and like yoga is one example, right? That's a silly example. But I literally will help guys that are like, hey, I want to sell my manufacturing business. Can you help me figure out what the value of my company is? Or my back office is a mess. Can you look at my financials and give me advice on, accounting or who I should hire next, right? So like, you're right. It's not really about the one transaction. And that is what makes us different, is in a transactional world, we're like relationship people. And so that's the biggest like thing that separates us,
Speaking of connections and whatnot, the episode that was released just before yours is with a guy named Brent Blakey. And what are the chances? Do you know any companies that do injection molding? Because he's looking for someone. So you do?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay, cool. Well, Brent, if you're
We'll
listening
talk
to this, Sarah,
offline.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sarah may be able to
Intro coming your way.
yeah. Well, if you're cool with it, I know he'll be cool with it. I'll just put you guys in an email together, and you can figure out if you can help and what he's looking for. But in the spirit of introduction, since we were talking about that came to that'd be, if this works out, that'd be pretty wild that we just documented the potential introduction here.
Sure. I mean, I always try to maintain discretion, right? Because everyone deserves privacy. But if I can make a connection and both parties are down, like I'm all for that.
Well, yeah, if
there's
they're
always it's got to be a win-win, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a no-brainer. But it's like there's nothing bad that's going to come out of two entrepreneurs meeting and discussing their businesses, right? Like it's just I just made introduction yesterday to another one of our guests who was on, and literally I forgot that I'd made the introduction. They were meeting. He calls me up. I'm on my way to a funeral yesterday, and I take the call or whatever. And he's like, "Hey, just met with the guy's named Steve that I introduced him to." He's like, "Badass dude. Just wanted to say thanks for the introduction. I don't know what will come of it, but I think something will come of it." Right? Like I love those calls.
Yeah, totally.
There's nothing bad that can happen when two good individuals meet that are very forward thinking and think big.
Abundant.
So
abundant in their thinking.
Yeah, especially like a lot of the time it'll be like at a trade show over a beer or grabbing sushi or something. Like I'm always down for that.
Of course you
Well,
are.
even
Yoga, sushi, wine. I know you. You're down for all that. You probably ride a damn bike to get there.
or ski there. Do you ski or snowboard?
Yeah, I ski. Yeah,
ski.
Beaver Creek's my home mountain.
Should ski circles around your ass, homie.
Do you, Landon? Do you ski or snowboard?
Both, but if I want to go have fun or try and keep up with Sarah, I'm definitely on skis.
Okay, growing up, because I ski growing up, my buddy and I, we were like, let's, he snowboarded and I skied, and we were like, let's, switch gear. And by the time we were down at the end, or bottom of the mountain, I was like, yo, give me my shit back. Like,
Yeah.
snowboarding is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys
They,
make it to Beaver Creek, I'll show you all the best spots,
Well, what I love about Colorado, I've only been, because you're in Vail, right? I haven't been to Vail.
Yeah. So it's a whole valley,
it's
right?
dope.
Yeah. So I live in a town called Eagle, but then, yeah, it goes Vail, Beaver Creek, and then Aspen is at the other end.
Because I've been to Denver, and I would imagine Vail is similar, but I love that like almost every restaurant was farm to table, like nice ass food.
Yeah.
So
The hippies are all about that shit, dude. And
yeah.
homegrown, like fresh made shit. They
Yeah,
may not.
homegrown to increase your appetite, and then
Yep, and then
homegrown to
homegrown.
satiate your
Yeah.
appetite.
Yeah,
Amen.
especially in Vail Village, Beaver Creek Village, you're finding like top notch because it's all Europeans, super wealthy Mexicans, like all just really rich people are visiting. So
There you
you
go.
can
Got to
find anything
accommodate.
you want. Yeah, you can find anything you want or can dream of in
Love
Vail,
it.
Colorado.
Well, Sarah, before we start wrapping up, one of the questions that we ask all of our guests is a book that's had an impact on them. And we
Mhm.
ask this because we want, I mean, we're bringing on great people like yourself, and there's folks listening to this that they're at all different stages of their entrepreneurial journey, from thinking about it to being at the beginning of it to being on the tail end of it and everywhere in between. And sometimes it can be overwhelming and intimidating as to like, where do I start to gather this information, and what content do I consume? And there's so much noise out there. So it's our way essentially of like distilling a reading list for folks. So the book that you chose is by Susan Conrad, called Get There Now. Why'd you pick that book, and what's the impact that's had on you?
Yeah, totally. So Suzanne, I spoke of her earlier, my mentor. She wrote this book speaking of her journey from being a single mom to, helping launch the first Lululemon stores and being on the board of that company. And just, again, going back to all the lessons that she taught me are in that book. And so it's just one of those things that I feel myself going back to, because there's just so many awesome nuggets there that you can just keep taking in. So she has a really unique journey as well. And yeah, just, it's been one of those great leadership books that I have, that, yeah, I feel like a lot of people haven't checked out yet, but it's definitely up there for me.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what would be like one of the main nuggets that you hold on to today that you learned from her slash is in the book?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, right? If not the biggest thing that I've learned from her is, if you're building a life that you want, you need to be constantly creating, right? Whether it's in your business, in your personal life, in your athletic pursuits, whatever, right? And so if you're reacting to anything around you, whether it's judgment, fear, doubt, hate, right? You're not creating in that moment. And so that's been a big thing for me, to just have that self-awareness. Like right now, am I creating or am I reacting? And as a leader, you don't want to be reacting to the market, to your peers, to your employees, to your own self-doubt. You want to be constantly creating.
That's actually a timely
Say I love
takeaway for
that.
myself right now. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah, it's massive. It's like weird, but it's small, but it's easy
Good.
to remember.
Love that. Well, if I'm thinking about buying a big ass piece of equipment and I need help doing so and getting money, if I'm listening to this and I'm in that industry, what's the best way to get a hold of you and see if you can help? Is it website, email, both? Where should people be sent?
Yeah, so our website is really easy. It's just techfin.net, like technology financial. And my email is just Sara at techfin.net, SARA I don't fuck around with the H. So yeah.
Love
So
it.
that's easy. And you can always hit me up on LinkedIn, pretty much an open book. So even during COVID, I had a finance club for some neighbors that were Crips. So I'm literally down to help anyone.
Love it.
Cool. Well, Sara, this has been a blast. It's been insightful. You have a great, fun personality, and you just like all of our other guests, do not have a straight path of where you started to where you are now. So we appreciate you bobbing and weaving along the way with us. And
Excited to see where you go too. And shout out to the first female guest on the BWTV pod.
yeah,
So
that's
I forgot
actually
to
a
mention
good,
that.
that's a good point, dude.
Yeah,
It's
thank
business
you so
with the
much, guys.
boys. It's business with the boys, but the boys are just Landon and I. It's not, we only have guys on. So
Yeah.
Sara, you broke the ice.
We
No
want some
Pennsylvania.
badass chicks on here. Yes, let's go. Let's keep the momentum rolling.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cool,
So much.
appreciate
Always
it.
good catching
Appreciate
up.
you all.
Yes, thank you. Good luck, and let us know if we can help with anything, and we'll be in touch offline, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. Talk soon, guys.
Right on.
See ya. And for everyone
Bye.
listening, appreciate your time and attention. We would love it if you shared the show, left us a review, and until next time, we're out.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That to me, you really playing with your life.